The rain started the night the piano stopped. Not a gentle, life-giving rain, but a brutal, wind-whipped assault that rattled the window panes of the old Victorian house on Elm Street, mirroring the sudden, violent silence that had fallen over the living room just moments before. Maya, only 9 years old, but with eyes that already held the weary knowledge of a much older soul, was curled up beneath a threadbare blanket on the dusty landing outside the kitchen. Her small world, which consisted mostly of the muffled melody of her mother's practice and the smell of stale coffee, had just fractured. The hook wasn't the sound of the glass shattering. That was predictable, a familiar percussion in the soundtrack of her life. The hook was the ensuing quiet, a terrifying vacuum that sucked all the air out of the grand, echoing foyer. Usually, her mother, Clara, would follow the explosive moment with a torrent of tears or a desperate, pleading whisper. Her father, Arthur, would respond with a low, controlled roar, a sound more menacing than any shout. But tonight, there was only the furious drum of the rain and the slow, heavy thud of a grandfather clock in the hall. It was the silence of consequence, the kind of stillness that precedes a great and irreversible change. Maya instinctively pulled the blanket tighter, muffling the faint tremor in her chest. She wasn't just hiding from the potential explosion, she was hiding from the knowledge of what she had witnessed, of the scene that now played on an endless, unforgiving loop behind her eyelids. It wasn't the physical impact, the sight of the glass pitcher spinning through the air and disintegrating against the marble hearth, that terrified her. It was the look in her mother's eyes just before the throw, a fleeting, terrifying moment where Maya saw not her loving, fragile mother, but a stranger possessed by a wild, unbound rage. And then the flicker of pure, unadulterated fear that followed as Arthur slowly rose from the velvet armchair. Arthur wasn't a man of sudden movements. He was a conductor of chaos, preferring to let tension build like a taut wire until it snapped on its own terms. He was a respected civil engineer in their quiet Connecticut town, known for his precision and unflappable demeanor. No one in the community, not the church ladies, not his colleagues, not the man at the hardware store, would ever believe the house he built for his family was structurally unsound, a silent prison. His control was his weapon. Maya waited. 5 minutes stretched into an eternity. Her bladder ached, but moving was impossible. Her mind, a brilliant, frantic machine honed by years of hypervigilance, raced through scenarios. Had someone been hurt? Was the piano okay? Did they forget she was there? Was it her fault? The last question was the most insidious, a constant whisper she had learned to accept as truth. She was the witness, the burden, the reason they fought. At least that's what the silence seemed to imply. Finally, a noise, the slow, measured tread of footsteps ascending the grand staircase. They didn't stop at the second floor, where her tiny, safe bedroom was, but continued up the final, creaky flight toward the attic, a place both feared and forbidden. The sound was deliberate, each step a pronounced, echoing statement. Maya held her breath until the attic door groaned open, and then the soft click of a lock. Hours passed. The rain subsided, replaced by the chirping of cicadas, a deceptive lullaby of summer nights. Maya finally crept back to her room, her small body stiff with tension. Her room was a sanctuary, a minimalist space dominated by a large north-facing window and a bookshelf stuffed with the battered, hand-me-down fantasy novels she used as escape hatches. She didn't dare look downstairs. She climbed into bed, her body positioned perfectly still, a habit developed to appear invisible and non-threatening. But sleep was an elusive adversary. Her imagination, always keen, populated the darkness with possibilities. What was in the attic? Did her father lock her mother up there? Was it a punishment? The silence continued to hang over the house, a thick, suffocating blanket. It was worse than the fighting. The fight was the explosion. The silence was the fallout, the slow, lingering poison that seeped into the very foundations of the home. The next morning, the house was immaculate, strangely bright. The shattered glass had vanished, the dark stain on the marble hearth scrubbed away, and the velvet armchair returned to its place. Arthur sat at the head of the long dining table, reading the New York Times, his posture impeccable, his tie neatly knotted. He didn't look up when Maya entered the room, nor did he acknowledge her small, whispered good morning. The air was crisp and odorless, save for the faint clinical scent of cleaning products. Her mother, Clara, was absent. No practicing, no stale coffee, no hurried attempts at a breakfast she would barely touch. Her eyes flickered to the closed attic door and then back to her father. Arthur lowered the paper, his gaze finally meeting hers. His eyes were not angry, but unsettlingly neutral, like a clear winter sky before a storm. "Your mother needed a break," he stated, his voice calm and even. "She has gone to visit her sister in Maine. It will just be you and me for a while, Maya. I trust you will be a big girl and cause no trouble." Maine. Clara had no sister in Maine. She had a brother in California and a deceased aunt in New Hampshire. Maine was a place on a map, a vast empty canvas where her mother's light could be easily erased. The lie was delivered with such flawless composure that it felt like an undeniable truth, a new, unchallengeable rule of the house.
Maya simply nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She understood the unspoken code. We do not talk about the attic. We do not talk about the silence. We do not talk about the piano. She ate her dry toast, every bite a conscious, painful effort, and listened to the grandfather clock mark the time. The house felt lighter, less volatile, yet simultaneously heavier, burdened by the crushing weight of a shared, unspoken secret. That day, the first day of her new life, Maya learned a crucial survival skill: how to become a ghost. She moved through the house silently, her steps barely brushing the worn oriental rugs. She read in corners, her imagination her only friend. She never went near the attic door, yet she felt its presence constantly, a looming shadow at the top of the stairs, an anchor point for the anxiety that now permanently resided beneath her sternum. Years passed like this, measured not by birthdays or holidays, but by the relentless, predictable routine Arthur enforced. The piano remained silent, covered by a white sheet like a monument to a beautiful death. Maya excelled in school, her grades impeccable, her behavior flawless, a direct result of her training as a surveillance expert in her own home. She learned to read Arthur's moods by the subtle flexing of his jaw, the angle of his newspaper, the speed of his spoon in his coffee cup. She was safe only when she was invisible, only when she was a perfect extension of his quiet, controlled environment. One afternoon, when Maya was 17, Arthur left his study door ajar after taking a phone call. She was dusting the hallway, her assigned chore, when a piece of paper on his mahogany desk caught her eye. It was a recent bank statement. Next to a sizable withdrawal was a small cryptic notation scrawled in Arthur's precise hand: CM, monthly fee. Clara's initials, a monthly fee. Her heart began to pound against her ribs, the relentless rhythm of a long dormant hope. Her mother wasn't in Maine. She was somewhere, and Arthur was paying for it. The truth, however dark, was preferable to the endless, suffocating mystery. That night, the first day of her new life, she waited until the house was utterly silent, then crept to the attic stairs, her fingers brushing the smooth, cold wood of the locked door. The dust was thick, undisturbed, but beneath the lintel, pressed deep into the worn carpet fibers, was a single long strand of bright, undeniable auburn hair, her mother's exact color. The lie had been about the location, not the consequence. The piano stopped, the silence began, and someone had been locked in the attic. And now, 7 years later, the attic door was the silent sentinel of a truth she was finally old enough and brave enough to uncover. She needed to know what happened that night, and more importantly, where the monthly fees were going. Her childhood was over. Her investigation had just begun. The discovery of the auburn hair was the spark that ignited the bonfire of Maya's suppressed history. It was physical proof, a tangible rebellion against the 7 years of psychological erasure Arthur had enforced. The fact that the hair was near the attic door and not inside suggested a struggle or a deliberate token left behind, a desperate whisper across the years. Maya realized that confronting Arthur directly was not an option. He specialized in stonewalling and deflection, weaving layers of plausible deniability around his actions until the truth became indistinguishable from her own nervous anxieties. Her years of observation were now her greatest asset. She needed an architect's precision to dismantle the architecture of his control. Her focus shifted immediately to the CM monthly fee notation. She recognized the account number on the bank statement. It was associated with a local private bank Arthur used for his engineering contracts. The next day, feigning interest in her father's career, she casually asked him about secure financial documentation, planting the idea that she might need to access his filing cabinet to study his organizational methods for a high school project. Arthur, proud of his professional legacy, readily agreed, giving her the combination to the locked cabinet in his study. That night, armed with a small flashlight and the relentless, driving curiosity of a child finally demanding her own narrative, Maya opened the cabinet. It was a perfectly organized monument to his life, blueprints filed neatly, tax returns bound by year, and a section dedicated to personal documents. She bypassed the wills and insurance policies, going straight to the back, where she found a thin manila envelope labeled simply, Maine. Inside, there wasn't a forwarding address for a sister. It was a single, laminated ID card from a private long-term care facility 2 states away, deep in the forests of upstate New York, the Serenity House. The ID bore a faded photo of Clara, looking much thinner, her bright eyes clouded, under the name Clara Middleton. Below the photo was the designation non-voluntary resident. Attached to the card was a single sheet of paper, a signed official court order for long-term psychiatric commitment, dated the morning after the night the piano stopped. The diagnosis, scribbled by a court-appointed psychologist Arthur had clearly influenced, was acute paranoia and severe hysterical psychosis. A wave of nausea hit Maya. It wasn't the shock of where her mother was, but the brutal realization of the clinical, calculated effort Arthur had undertaken to legally obliterate her existence. He hadn't just moved her, he had institutionalized her, locking her away behind walls of paper and procedure just as effectively as the old attic door. The man she lived with wasn't just an abusive husband, he was a master manipulator who used the legal system as an extension of his own power. Her next move required discretion and an external perspective. She couldn't call the facility directly, as Arthur had doubtless left instructions limiting contact. She needed a way to visit without his knowledge, which meant she needed money and a legitimate, ironclad excuse for a 2-day absence. She remembered the local historian, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, an eccentric, kind woman who lived down the street and had always admired Maya's sharp mind. Mrs. Vance specialized in documenting the architectural history of the town, particularly the grand old Victorian homes like Maya's. She approached her with a proposition. She would spend a weekend assisting Mrs. Vance with transcribing old town records in exchange for a generous prepaid research stipend. It was a believable cover story. Mrs. Vance was known to pay handsomely for meticulous work, and Arthur would approve of the intellectual pursuit. 2 weeks later, the plan was set. On a crisp Saturday morning, Maya told Arthur she would be spending the weekend with Mrs. Vance, even showing him the transcription contract. She took the train, then a series of regional buses, her wallet thin but her resolve ironclad. The Serenity House was not a stately hospital. It was a sprawling, vaguely sinister compound of gray stone and impenetrable fences, surrounded by dense pine forest. It smelled of antiseptic and old wood. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with a controlled, monotonous quiet.
Maya presented herself not as Clara's daughter, but as a college researcher writing a paper on the sociological impact of long-term care, and politely requested an interview with an older long-term patient. The receptionist, a tired woman named Brenda, was skeptical until Maya presented a convincing fake letterhead from a prestigious Boston university. Brenda relented, and after a short wait, Maya was led to a drab communal lounge. And there was Clara. 7 years had passed since the night of the piano. Clara was 49, but looked 60. Her once vibrant auburn hair was streaked with gray, pulled back tightly from a face that was thin and drawn. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a chipped ceramic cup, but when she looked up and her eyes met Maya's, the shock was immediate and electric. The cloudiness vanished, replaced by a devastating recognition. "Maya," Clara whispered, the name a painful gasp of air. Maya crossed the room in 2 strides, ignoring the subtle attempts of the attending nurse to intervene. She sat beside her mother and took her trembling hand. "I'm not supposed to be here, Mom. I only have a few minutes. I need you to tell me everything." Clara squeezed her daughter's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Her voice was raspy, unused to extended conversation, but her mind, Maya soon realized, was tragically clear. "Arthur said I was sick," she began, her eyes darting nervously to the nurse who stood just out of earshot. "That night, he didn't throw the pitcher. I did. I knew he was cheating, and I tried to leave, but he blocked the door. He told me if I ever tried to take you away, he would ensure I never saw you again, that I was unstable, and he had the power to prove it."
The truth was a heavy, cold weight. Clara hadn't been locked in the attic. She had been packed, sedated, and legally incarcerated the next morning. But the attic, the silent locked door, that was Arthur's psychological weapon, a powerful reminder to Maya of the possibility of confinement, a constant threat that kept her compliant and silent. The strand of hair must have fallen from a coat during the hurried pre-dawn preparation. He lied to everyone. He told them I had a psychotic break, that I was violent. Clara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a fierce, desperate whisper. "But Maya, I didn't sign the voluntary commitment papers. He forged my signature. He used his connections. He told them I had threatened to harm you, which was the final unforgivable lie." She explained the monthly fee. It wasn't a payment to the facility, it was a retainer for a powerful lawyer in Albany who had helped Arthur navigate the legal labyrinth of involuntary commitment, a man known for burying the truth for high-paying clients. Maya felt the floor tilting beneath her. Her father, the meticulous civil engineer, wasn't just an angry man. He was a criminal who had orchestrated a flawless 7-year-long kidnapping and judicial deception, all to maintain his image of control. The trauma wasn't just the memory of the fight. It was the realization that her entire adolescent life had been built on a foundation of meticulously constructed lies. "You have to get me out," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I have the proof. I kept a diary, Maya, hidden in the lining of my old music box. It details everything, the arguments, the forgery, the threats. It's in the attic, in the far corner, tucked behind the old trunks. It's the truth he tried to bury." The attending nurse approached, her smile tight. "Time's up, dear. Your sociology paper will have to wait." Maya stood, forcing her expression into one of polite academic disappointment. She hugged her mother tightly, smelling the faint scent of old lavender and institutional detergent. "I will come back for you, Mom. I promise." The journey back was a blur. Maya's mind was fixated on the attic, the forbidden space that held the key to her mother's freedom and the demolition of Arthur's life. She understood now. The attic wasn't a cage, it was a safe deposit box. The ultimate, final act of her childhood trauma recovery would be crossing that threshold, not just to retrieve a diary, but to reclaim the truth she had been denied. She arrived late, told Arthur the research was exhausting but fruitful, and then went straight to her room, locking the door. She had spent 7 years being the perfect, invisible daughter. Tonight, she would become the engine of her father's downfall. Maya returned home from the Serenity House a different person. The ghost of the silent, compliant child had been exorcised, replaced by a steely resolve that hummed beneath her skin. The knowledge of her mother's plight and the cold, calculated cruelty of her father had forged a new kind of strength within her. The house, once a prison, now felt like a battleground. She spent the next few days in a hyper-aware state, observing Arthur with forensic precision. He remained oblivious, basking in the predictable order he had so carefully constructed. His routine was his weakness, and Maya began to map it out, looking for the precise moment he would be gone long enough for her to execute her plan, the attic. The opportunity came on a Thursday. Arthur had a standing evening meeting with his engineering firm's senior partners, a weekly ritual that usually lasted until well past midnight. He would leave at 7 p.m. sharp, after a final, critical glance over his newspaper and a predictable, "Don't wait up, Maya." That Thursday evening, as the grandfather clock chimed 7, Arthur closed the front door with his usual deliberate click. Maya waited, counting to 60, then 60 again, until she was sure his car had pulled out of the driveway. The silence in the house, usually suffocating, now felt like an ally, a vast, echoing space for her to reclaim. She walked to the attic stairs, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The old wooden door, dark and imposing, loomed at the top. She had seen Arthur open it only once, years ago, to retrieve some old blueprints. The lock was a simple key and knob mechanism. She remembered seeing a ring of spare keys hanging in the back of his desk drawer, where he kept old tools and miscellaneous hardware. Sure enough, nestled among rusty screwdrivers and dried-up paintbrushes was a small tarnished brass key ring. On it, a single skeleton-like key, larger than the others, with the distinct worn sheen of frequent use. Taking a deep breath, Maya ascended the creaky stairs. The attic door groaned open with a mournful sigh, releasing a wave of dusty, stale air that smelled faintly of forgotten memories and mothballs. The space was vast and cluttered, a graveyard of the family's past, antique furniture draped in white sheets, boxes labeled with faded handwriting, and the ghostly shapes of forgotten heirlooms. A single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling cast long, dancing shadows. Maya remembered Clara's words in the far corner, tucked behind the old trunks. She navigated the labyrinth of forgotten items, her small flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The trunks were massive, heavy wooden chests, their latches rusted shut. She squeezed between them and the rough-hewn wall, feeling the grit of ancient dust under her fingers. And there it was, a small, intricately carved wooden music box, half hidden beneath a dusty old tapestry. It was her mother's, a gift from Clara's own mother, a precious relic Maya hadn't seen in years. She had almost forgotten its existence. Its surface was worn, but the delicate floral patterns were still visible beneath the grime. With trembling fingers, Maya found the small, almost invisible seam in the lining of the music box. She carefully prized it open. Inside, nestled beneath the velvet, was not a hidden compartment for jewelry, but a thin, leather-bound diary, its pages brittle with age. She pulled it out, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped it. The first few pages were filled with Clara's elegant script, detailing mundane events, daily frustrations, and tender observations about young Maya. Then the tone shifted. The handwriting became frantic, the words crowded, detailing the increasing arguments with Arthur, his controlling behavior, his jealousy, and finally her discovery of his affair. The date of the shattered picture, etched into Maya's memory, marked a turning point. "He threatened to take Maya from me," Clara had written, her desperation almost palpable on the page. "Said I was unstable, that no one would believe me.
I confronted him, told him I was leaving. He said if I took a step out that door with Maya, he would ensure I never saw her again. That night, I tried to escape. He physically blocked my way. I threw the pitcher not at him, but in despair. I wanted to break free, but he broke me instead. The diary continued with agonizing detail. Arthur's calm, terrifying resolve the next morning, the court papers, the lawyer, the forged signature, the forced departure. Clara meticulously documented every phone call she was allowed to make, all carefully monitored, every visitor she was denied, every plea for legal assistance that was dismissed. She wrote of her growing despair, her fear that Maya would grow up believing the lies, believing her mother truly was sick. A single tear-stained page stood out. My greatest fear is that Maya will never know, that she will think I abandoned her. My love for her is the only thing that keeps me sane in this place. If I ever get out, I will fight for her, for us.
Maya closed the diary, tears streaming down her face, not just for her mother, but for the lost years, for the childhood stolen by a man who valued control over everything else. She wasn't just holding a diary, she was holding the key to her mother's freedom and the undeniable truth that would shatter Arthur's carefully constructed world. She didn't need to read any more tonight. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Arthur's usual Saturday morning routine was interrupted by a sharp knock on the front door. He answered it to find two plainclothes police officers standing on his porch, flanked by a woman in a conservative suit holding a briefcase, a family court advocate. "Mr. Arthur Middleton?" one officer asked, his voice firm but polite. "We have a warrant for your arrest based on allegations of forgery, unlawful confinement, and parental abduction, and a court order for the immediate release of Mrs. Clara Middleton." Arthur's face, usually so composed, crumpled. His eyes darted to Maya, who stood in the living room doorway, the leather-bound diary clutched openly in her hands. Her gaze was not angry, but devastatingly calm, the calm of someone who had finally seen through the illusion. "Maya," he said, his voice a strained whisper, "what have you done?" "I unlocked the truth, Dad," she replied, her voice steady and clear, for the first time in her life, completely unafraid. "I found Mom's diary. I called the police. I contacted the family court advocate, and they believed me." He tried to protest, to invoke his status, his reputation, but the officers were unwavering. They read him his rights, and the family court advocate began to explain the legal proceedings that would follow. As Arthur was led away, his meticulously ordered world collapsing around him, he cast one last look at Maya. It wasn't hatred in his eyes, but a chilling sense of betrayal, as if she had violated an unspoken pact of silence. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Legal battles, media attention, and the painstaking process of reintegrating Clara back into society. It wasn't easy. 7 years of institutionalization had left their scars, but with Maya's unwavering support and the professional help they both sought, Clara slowly began to heal. She started playing the piano again, its music filling the house with a joyous, tentative melody, reclaiming the sounds of a life that had been violently muted. Maya, no longer a ghost in her own home, thrived. She went to college, studying law, her experience shaping her passion for justice and advocacy. She realized that her childhood trauma hadn't broken her. It had made her resilient, observant, and fiercely empathetic. The silence she had endured taught her the power of a single clear voice. Years later, Maya and Clara sat on the porch swing of the old Victorian,
the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple. The house, once a symbol of their pain, was slowly being transformed into a home, filled with laughter, conversation, and the rich, complex music of their shared lives. "Thank you, Maya," Clara said, her voice strong now, full of a hard-won peace, "for finding me, for believing me." Maya leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I never stopped, Mom. Even when I didn't know you were there, a part of me always knew. The echo of the piano, it never truly stopped for me." The trauma of their past would always be a part of their story, a silent echo in the quiet corners of their memory, but it no longer defined them. They had faced the darkness, unlocked the truth, and together stepped into the light, forever bound by the resilience of their love and the unbreakable power of a mother and daughter reunited.